The waste never stopped coming. Kex 7742 moved through the dimly lit corridors of Waste Station Omega 7 with mechanical precision, his 6 arms efficiently sorting the endless stream of refuse that flowed through the facility's recycling tubes. Organic waste went to the bioprocessors, metals to the smelters, and hazardous materials to the neutralization chambers. His genetically modified digestive system could break down most substances that would kill other species, making him invaluable to the Council's waste management operations. He had been doing this for as long as he could remember. 312 years for months and 16 days, to be exact. Not that anyone was counting. The other workers on the station avoided him. The Zephyrian supervisors treated him like equipment that could unfortunately talk back. The few organic beings who worked the less hazardous sections whispered among themselves when he passed, their translator devices picking up fragments of conversations about the waste eater and genetic abomination. Kex 7742 had stopped caring about their opinions decades ago. He had a purpose, and that was enough. Or so he told himself during the long, empty hours between shifts. The alarm that changed everything came at 0347 station time. Emergency klaxons blared through the corridors as Kex 7742 was finishing his 3rd shift of the day. The announcement that followed, delivered in the cold, clinical tones of Station Commander Velthon, sent a ripple of excitement through the normally dull facility. Attention, all personnel. An unregistered vessel has suffered catastrophic engine failure and is on collision course with Station Omega 7. All non-essential workers report to emergency shelters immediately. Damage control teams to standby positions. Kex 7742 paused in his sorting routine. Crashes were rare but not unheard of. Usually, they involved small courier ships or mining vessels whose navigation systems had failed. The wreckage would be processed like any other refuse, the crew either dead on impact or evacuated if they were lucky. But something about this felt different. The way the commander's voice had hesitated on the word unregistered suggested this wasn't just another routine accident. 23 minutes later, the station shook as something massive struck the outer hull. The lights flickered, and several waste processing tubes ruptured, spilling their contents across the floor. Kex 7742 instinctively began collecting the scattered debris, his programming overriding any curiosity about what had just happened. He was nearly finished cleaning up when Supervisor Velthon's voice crackled through his personal communicator. Waste Unit 7742, report to Docking Bay 7 immediately. Cleanup assignment. Kex 7742 acknowledged the order and made his way through the station's winding corridors. Docking Bay 7 was in the outer ring, usually reserved for emergency repairs and quarantine procedures. He had only been there twice before, both times to dispose of contaminated materials from ships carrying unknown pathogens. The bay's massive doors were sealed when he arrived, but he could hear voices coming from the other side. Angry voices, speaking in a language his universal translator was struggling to parse. The words came through in fragments. Not authorized to, and demand to speak to, and rights under Galactic. Supervisor Velthon was waiting for him outside the bay, his 4 eyes displaying the particular shade of irritation that meant someone was making his life difficult. The Zephyrian scaled hide was flushed with stress patterns, and his usually immaculate uniform showed signs of hasty dressing. Finally, Velthon said, his voice carrying the undertone of barely controlled frustration that all Zephyrians used when addressing genetic constructs. We have a situation. The vessel that crashed contains biological waste that requires immediate disposal. What type of biological waste? Kex 7742 asked, running through his mental database of potential hazards. The worst kind, Velthon replied grimly. Living beings that refuse to die quietly. The supervisor's claws clicked against his datapad as he pulled up the relevant files. The ship appears to be of human origin. Do you know what humans are? Unit 7742. Kex 7742 searched his memory banks. Humans. Species classification: sapient mammalian bipeds. Status: primitive. Recently contacted. Technology level: barely space-capable. Psychological profile: aggressive, territorial, highly emotional. Recommended interaction protocol: minimal contact, strict quarantine procedures. Precisely, Velthon said. And now 3 of them are sitting in our docking bay, making demands and refusing to follow basic decontamination procedures. The medical team has declared them a potential biohazard, but they won't submit to sterilization. Station commander has authorized their disposal as contaminated biological waste. The casual way Velthon said those words sent an unexpected chill through Kex 7742's modified nervous system. Disposal of living beings wasn't uncommon in his line of work, but it usually involved creatures that were already dead or dying from the various toxins that passed through the station. The idea of processing healthy, intelligent beings felt different somehow. Are they diseased? Kex 7742 asked. Unknown. They're carrying pathogens that don't match any in our databases. Could be harmless, could be the next Great Plague. Station protocol is clear. When in doubt, sterilize completely. Velthon handed him a molecular disruptor, a device that could break down organic matter at the atomic level. Make it quick and efficient. The commander doesn't want this incident to attract attention from the council. Kex 7742 took the weapon, its familiar weight settling into his primary manipulator arm. He had used similar devices thousands of times to break down complex biological waste that his digestive system couldn't handle. This should have felt no different. But as the docking bay doors began to cycle open, he found himself hesitating for the first time in his long existence. The bay beyond was a scene of controlled chaos. Emergency foam had sealed several hull breaches, and the acrid smell of burned electronics hung in the air. In the center of the space sat a vessel unlike anything in Kex 7742's memory banks. It was crude by galactic standards, its hull a patchwork of different alloys held together with what appeared to be primitive welding. Burn marks and micrometeorite impacts scarred its surface, telling the story of a long journey through unforgiving space. But it was the 3 beings standing beside the wreckage that captured his attention. Humans were smaller than he had expected, barely reaching his chest height even with his naturally hunched posture. Their pale pink skin was marked with various discolorations and what appeared to be self-inflicted decorations. 2 of them stood protectively in front of the third, who seemed to be injured and leaning heavily against the ship's hull. What struck him most was their eyes. Unlike the multifaceted organs of most spacefaring species, human eyes were simple, primitive things. But there was something in their gaze that made Kex 7742 pause. Intelligence, yes, but also something else. Something he couldn't quite identify. The tallest of the 3, a female with long brown fibers growing from her head, noticed him first. She said something in their rapid, emotional language, and the other 2 turned to look at him. Their expressions shifted from wariness to something that looked almost like horror. Kex 7742 understood their reaction. His appearance tended to have that effect on most species. His elongated limbs, redundant organs, and the various mechanical implants that helped him process toxic waste made him look more like a nightmare than a living being. Stay back, the female called out, her translator device finally catching up to their rapid speech. We're not going anywhere until we speak to someone in authority. You're speaking to the appropriate authority, Velthon announced as he entered the bay behind Kex 7742. I'm Supervisor Velthon, and this station operates under direct council mandate. You have entered council space without proper authorization and are carrying potentially hazardous biological contaminants. Standard protocol requires immediate sterilization. Sterilization? The injured human's voice was weak, but carried an edge of disbelief. We're not contaminated. We're survivors. Our ship's life support failed 3 days ago. We need medical attention, not sterilization. Your medical needs are irrelevant, Velthon replied with the cold efficiency that Kex, 7742, had heard thousands of times before. You pose a potential threat to this facility and its operations. Waste Unit 7742 will now process your biological matter in the most efficient manner possible. The humans' universal translators worked for several seconds before providing the full meaning of those words. When understanding finally dawned, their reactions were immediate and intense. The uninjured male, who had been quiet until now, stepped forward with his hands raised. Wait, you can't just murder us. We have rights. We're members of the Terran Federation, and our disappearance will be investigated. Your political affiliations are meaningless here, Velthon said dismissively. This is council space, and council law applies. You are contaminated biological waste, nothing more. Kex, 7742, raised the molecular disruptor, following his program instructions. But something made him hesitate. The humans weren't cowering or begging like most species would in this situation. Instead, they were drawing closer together, the two healthy ones positioning themselves between him and their injured companion. If you're going to kill us, the female said, her voice steady despite the obvious fear in her eyes, at least tell us why. What contamination? What threat do we pose? Velthon's scales shifted to an annoyed orange pattern. You ask irrelevant questions. Unit 7742, proceed with disposal. Wait, Kex, 7742 said, surprising himself as much as the supervisor. Standard protocol requires identification of specific hazards before disposal. What pathogens are they carrying? The Zephyrian's four eyes fixed on him with obvious irritation. You question orders, Unit 7742? I request clarification to ensure proper disposal methods. Kex, 7742, replied carefully. If they carry viral agents, molecular disruption might aerosolize the pathogens. If they carry bacterial contamination, heat sterilization might be more appropriate. It was a reasonable argument, one that bought him a few moments to think. But think about what? Why was he hesitating? These beings were just biological waste, no different from the thousands of other organisms he had processed over the centuries. Velthon consulted his datapad with obvious reluctance. Medical scan indicates presence of several unknown microorganisms in their digestive systems. Probable cause: consumption of unsterilized food sources during their journey. Additional anomaly: their blood contains elevated levels of iron oxide, suggesting possible heavy metal contamination. Iron oxide? The female human laughed, a sound that seemed to contain more than just amusement. That's rust, you idiot. We've been eating emergency rations from rusty containers for 3 days. It's not contamination, it's malnutrition. Kex, 7742, accessed his databases again, cross-referencing the reported anomalies with known pathogenic profiles. The search came back negative. Iron oxide was indeed a common byproduct of corroded food containers. The unknown microorganisms were likely normal digestive bacteria, different enough from council species to register as unknown but harmless. Supervisor, he said carefully, scans indicate no actual pathogenic contamination. Disposal may not be necessary. Disposal protocols exist for a reason, Velthon snapped. Unknown equals dangerous. That is council law. But if they pose no actual threat, you question council law, Unit 7742? The question hung in the recycled air of the docking bay like a toxin. Questioning council law was a serious offense, one that could result in immediate decommissioning for a genetic construct like himself. But something about the humans' defiant stance and their willingness to protect each other despite certain death stirred something deep in his modified neural pathways. For 3 centuries, he had followed orders without question. He had processed biological waste, sorted debris, and cleaned up the refuse of 1,000 worlds without ever wondering if there might be another way to exist. But now, looking at these strange beings who valued each other's lives more than their own safety, he found himself experiencing something new. Doubt. I do not question council law, he said finally. I merely suggest that proper classification should precede disposal. If these beings are not contaminated, they would be classified as salvage rather than waste. The injured human, who had been growing paler during their conversation, suddenly spoke up in a weak but clear voice. Kex, that's your name, isn't it? The question caught everyone by surprise. Kex, 7742, hadn't expected the humans to pay attention to how the supervisor addressed him. I am Waste Unit 7742, he replied. But, Kex, the human continued, that's what he called you. Kex, it's almost like a real name. Genetic constructs do not have names, Velthon interrupted. They have designations. Unit 7742 is equipment, nothing more. The female human's eyes fixed on Kex, 7742, with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. You don't look like equipment to me. You look like someone who's trying to make a choice. I make no choices, Kex, 7742 said automatically. I follow programming and instructions. Then why are we still alive? The question hit him like a blast of radiation. Why were they still alive? He had his orders. He had his weapon. The disposal should have been completed minutes ago. He started, then stopped. For the first time in 3 centuries of existence, he genuinely didn't know what to say. The moment stretched into silence, broken only by the hum of the station's life support systems and the occasional groan of cooling metal from the crashed ship. Velthon's scales were shifting through increasingly agitated color patterns, while the humans watched Kex, 7742, with expressions he couldn't quite interpret. Finally, the supervisor's patience ran out. Unit 7742, you will complete the disposal immediately, or you'll be decommissioned for defective programming. The threat was real. Kex, 7742, had seen other genetic constructs recycled for far less serious infractions. His continued existence depended on absolute obedience. But as he looked at the 3 humans, still standing together despite their fear, still protecting each other even in the face of certain death, he realized that existence might not be the same thing as living. And for the first time in his long, controlled life, Kex, 7742, made a choice that was entirely his own. Kex, 7742, lowered the molecular disruptor. The movement was small, almost imperceptible, but in the tense atmosphere of the docking bay it felt like thunder. Supervisor Velthon's scales flashed through rapid color changes, settling on the deep crimson that meant serious trouble. Unit 7742, raise your weapon and complete the disposal. I cannot comply, Kex, 7742 said, the words feeling strange in his vocal processors. He had never said those words before. In 3 centuries of existence, he had never found an order he couldn't follow. Cannot or will not. Velthon's voice carried the dangerous undertone that preceded violent disciplinary action. Kex, 7742, considered the question carefully. The distinction mattered, both legally and personally. Will not, he said finally. The supervisor's hand moved toward his sidearm, but the female human stepped forward before he could draw it. Excuse me, she said, her voice carrying an authority that seemed disproportionate to her small stature. But I think there's been a misunderstanding about who we are. Velthon's attention snapped to her, his predator instincts responding to the challenge in her tone. You are unauthorized aliens carrying biological contamination. Your identity is irrelevant. I'm Dr. Sarah Chun, Chief Medical Officer of the TFS Determination, she replied, pulling a small device from her damaged clothing. This is Commander Marcus Webb, and the injured man is Lieutenant Tom Rodriguez. We're on a diplomatic mission to establish contact with the Galactic Council. She held up the device, which projected a holographic display showing official-looking documents and identification codes. Kex 7742's enhanced vision picked up details that the supervisor's standard implants might miss. The codes were legitimate, crafted with the kind of precision that suggested advanced technological capabilities. Your species isn't advanced enough for diplomatic contact, Velthon said dismissively, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. 6 months ago, that might have been true, Commander Webb said, speaking for the first time since the confrontation began. But the situation has changed. Humanity has made several significant technological breakthroughs recently. Our government believes it's time to establish formal relations with the Council. Even if that were true, Velthon replied, his scales shifting to skeptical yellow patterns. This is a waste processing station. Diplomatic missions go through proper channels, with advance notice and security clearances. Dr. Chen's expression darkened. We tried proper channels. Our communications were ignored for 8 months. Every attempt to contact council representatives was either blocked or returned with automated rejection notices. So we decided to make the journey ourselves. Without authorization. Without permission, she corrected. But not without right. According to the Galactic Accord Section 847b, any sentient species has the right to petition for council recognition through direct contact if standard diplomatic channels prove unresponsive. Kex, 7742, found himself impressed despite his lack of familiarity with diplomatic protocols. The humans had clearly done their research, and their legal arguments seemed sound. More importantly, their willingness to risk everything for a chance at recognition spoke to a determination that he had never encountered in any other species. Velthon was less impressed. Legal technicalities are irrelevant. You are contaminated and pose a threat to this station. Then test us, Lieutenant Rodriguez said from where he leaned against the ship. His voice was weak but clear. Do a proper medical scan. If we're contaminated, treat us. If we're not, let us contact our government. This station is not equipped for diplomatic procedures, Velthon said, but his tone suggested he was beginning to realize that summary execution might not be as simple as he had initially thought. Then transfer us to a station that is, Dr. Chen replied immediately. We're not asking for special treatment. We're asking for basic rights under galactic law. The argument continued, but Kex, 7742, found his attention drifting to the humans themselves rather than their words. He studied their body language, their facial expressions, the way they positioned themselves relative to each other. Despite their fear and exhaustion, they maintained a protective formation around their injured companion. When Supervisor Velthon raised his voice, they moved closer together rather than scattering. It was behavior he had never seen before. Most species, when faced with authority figures like the Zephyrian Supervisor, either submitted completely or adopted individualistic survival strategies. These humans did neither. They stood together. Unit 7742, Velthon called suddenly, breaking his train of thought. Security sweep of the crashed vessel. I want to know what they were really carrying. It was a reasonable order, one that Kex, 7742, could follow without moral complications. He approached the damaged ship, noting the humans' tension as he passed them. Dr. Chen caught his arm as he moved by. Kex, she said quietly, using the shortened version of his designation again. Thank you. The word stopped him cold. Gratitude was not an emotion he had encountered often in his existence. Waste disposal units were not typically thanked for their services. I have done nothing worthy of gratitude, he replied. You didn't kill us when you were ordered to, she said. In my experience, that's definitely worth a thank you. Kex, 7742, considered her words as he continued toward the ship. The vessel's interior was even more cramped than its exterior suggested. Everything was designed for efficiency rather than comfort, with every available space utilized for either equipment or supplies. It was the ship of a species that had been forced to make hard choices about what to carry into the unknown. The cargo bay contained exactly what the humans had claimed: emergency supplies, communication equipment, and what appeared to be gifts or trade goods. No weapons beyond basic defensive tools. No dangerous technology beyond their ship's primitive but functional drive system. No biological agents beyond the standard microflora that any living being would carry. Most importantly, he found their mission records. The data files painted a picture of a species that had been trying for years to establish peaceful contact with the galactic community. Their initial attempts had been clumsy and often ignored, but their persistence was remarkable. They had studied council laws, learned galactic languages, and prepared extensive cultural exchange proposals. They weren't invaders or contamination sources. They were explorers, reaching out despite the vast distances and dangers involved. When he returned to the docking bay, Velthon was speaking rapidly into his communicator while the humans waited with obvious anxiety. Lieutenant Rodriguez had grown even paler, and Dr. Chun was checking his vital signs with a portable medical scanner. "Report," the supervisor demanded when he noticed Kex 7742's return. "Cargo consists of supplies, gifts, and communication equipment," Kex 7742 said carefully. "Mission documentation confirms stated purpose: establishment of diplomatic contact. No weapons, no biological agents, no technological threats detected." "That's impossible. Unauthorized visitors always carry something dangerous." "Perhaps," Kex 7742 said, accessing his memory banks for precedent. "These visitors are not unauthorized. According to Section 847B of the Galactic Accords, which I have now reviewed, their presence here may be legally justified." Velthon's scales went through a rapid series of color changes that indicated extreme agitation. "Genetic constructs are not qualified to interpret galactic law." "No," Kex 7742 agreed. "But database access is within my operational parameters. The law exists. The humans appear to have followed it." "Even if that were true," the supervisor said through clenched teeth, "this station lacks authority to make diplomatic decisions. The humans must be detained until proper authorities can review their case." "How long will that take?" Commander Webb asked. "Standard review procedures take between 6 and 18 months, Velthon replied with obvious satisfaction. "You will be held in quarantine until then." The humans exchanged glances, and Kex 7742 could see calculations running behind their eyes. They had limited supplies, an injured companion, and no guarantee that the proper authorities would ever actually review their case. "That's a death sentence," Dr. Chin said flatly. "Tom needs medical attention now, not in 6 months. And our ship's life support systems are beyond repair. Station medical facilities are not authorized to treat unknown species," Velthon replied. "Quarantine protocols are absolute." Kex 7742 watched Lieutenant Rodriguez sway on his feet, saw the way his companions immediately moved to support him, and felt something shift in his neural pathways. The injured human was dying, slowly but surely, while bureaucratic procedures ground forward with mechanical indifference. It was a familiar scene. He had witnessed thousands of living beings die while authorities debated proper disposal procedures. The only difference was that this time, he was being asked to actively participate in the death, rather than simply cleaning up afterward. "Medical treatment would constitute contamination risk," he said slowly, working through the implications of what he was about to suggest. "However, waste processing protocols include decontamination procedures for biological material." The supervisor looked at him with confusion. "What are you suggesting, Unit 7742? Waste processing systems include medical-grade decontamination and sterilization equipment," Kex 7742 continued, his mind racing through technical specifications and regulatory loopholes. If the humans were classified as contaminated biological waste, they would be subject to standard decontamination procedures before disposal. Dr. Chin caught on immediately. Decontamination procedures that would include medical stabilization to prevent decomposition during processing. "Precisely," Kex 7742 said. "Standard protocol requires that biological waste be stabilized before disposal to prevent contamination spread." Velthon's scales shifted through several colors as he considered the implications. It was a bureaucratic solution to a bureaucratic problem, using the system's own rigid procedures to create a loophole. You're suggesting that I classify living beings as waste in order to provide the medical treatment? He asked incredulously. I'm suggesting adherence to established protocols. Kex, 7742 replied. If they are contaminated, they are waste. If they are waste, they must be properly processed according to standard procedures. The absurdity of the argument was matched only by its logical consistency within the framework of council bureaucracy. By classifying the humans as contaminated waste, the station would be required to stabilize them medically before disposal. The medical stabilization could take weeks or even months, during which time proper diplomatic channels could be contacted. This is ridiculous, Velthon muttered, but he was already pulling up the relevant regulatory codes on his datapad. Processing biological waste with active neural functions requires medical intervention to prevent cognitive degradation. And what about the diplomatic immunity question? Dr. Chen asked, pressing their advantage. Waste has no diplomatic status, Velthon replied automatically, then paused as he realized the implications. But waste processing procedures require notification of source governments in cases involving potentially intelligent material. Kex, 7742, felt something that might have been satisfaction as he watched the supervisor work through the logical maze they had constructed. The humans would receive medical treatment, their government would be contacted, and proper diplomatic procedures could be initiated, all because they were being classified as garbage. Very well, Velthon said finally. The 3 humans will be classified as contaminated biological waste pending proper disposal. Unit 7742, you are assigned to oversee their processing according to standard protocols. Understood, Kex, 7742 replied. Standard protocols require immediate medical stabilization and quarantine in the biological processing facility. As they prepared to transfer the humans to the medical section of the waste processing facility, Dr. Chen approached him again. Kex, she said quietly, why are you helping us? It was a question he had been asking himself since the confrontation began. The answer, when it came to him, was both simple and revolutionary. Because, he said, you call me by name. For the first time since their arrival, the human smiled. It was a small expression, barely a change in facial muscle configuration, but it transformed her entire appearance. Would you like a better name? She asked. Kex sounded a bit formal. The question hit him like a systems shock. In 3 centuries of existence, no one had ever suggested that his designation could be changed. Names were for people, not for equipment. I do not understand. Among humans, she explained as they walked toward the medical bay, names are important. They're how we show respect for each other. Kex is fine, but maybe something that sounds less like a serial number? What would you suggest? She thought for a moment, studying his elongated features and multiple limbs. How about Alex? It's close to Kex, but it's definitely a person's name. Alex. The syllables felt strange in his vocal processors, but they also felt right, like putting on clothing that actually fit. Alex, he repeated experimentally. That's right, Dr. Chun said, and that transformation happened to her face again. Welcome to the human race, Alex. As they helped Lieutenant Rodriguez into the medical facility, Alex found himself wondering if this was what belonging felt like. If so, it was worth every risk he was taking. He just hoped they would all live long enough for him to find out. 3 days later, Alex discovered that helping humans was far more complicated than processing waste. Lieutenant Rodriguez was stable, but still weak from his injuries and malnutrition. The medical systems in the biological processing facility were designed for sterilization rather than healing, but Alex had managed to adapt several pieces of equipment to provide basic life support and nutritional supplementation. More challenging were the humans themselves. They asked questions constantly. How long have you been here, Alex? Dr. Chun inquired as she helped him recalibrate a molecular scanner to detect human metabolic byproducts. 312 years for months and 19 days, he replied automatically. That's very precise. Do you remember when you first arrived? The question made him pause in his work. Memory of his early existence was fragmentary at best. I was not arrived. I was assembled here. This facility has been my only location of operation. Assembled. Commander Webb looked up from where he was helping Rodriguez with physical therapy exercises. You mean you were built here? Grown, Alex corrected. Genetic constructs are cultivated in specialized biotanks according to specific operational requirements. I was designed for waste processing and hazardous material handling. The silence that followed was different from the comfortable working quiet they had maintained for most of the morning. This silence had weight to it, filled with emotions Alex couldn't quite identify. Alex, Dr. Chin said carefully, have you ever been anywhere else? Seen anything besides this station? Waste unit functions do not require environmental variety, he replied, though the question stirred something uncomfortable in his neural pathways. I have access to educational databases containing information about other locations. But you've never actually seen them. Observation of non-operational environments would serve no functional purpose. Another weighted silence. What about other people? Rodriguez asked from his recovery bed. I mean, besides the Zephyrians and work crews. Do you have friends? The concept was so foreign that Alex had to access his databases to understand the question. Friends. Voluntary social relationships based on mutual affection and shared interests. Cross-referencing his personal history yielded no matches. Genetic constructs do not form social relationships, he said. We interact with supervisory personnel and other workers as operational requirements dictate. That sounds lonely, Dr. Chin said softly. Loneliness is a dysfunction, Alex replied, though the words felt less certain than they had in the past. Genetic constructs are designed to be self-sufficient. Webb stood up from his exercise routine and approached Alex with the same careful movement he might use around dangerous equipment. Alex, can I ask you something? When was the last time you did something just because you wanted to? The question stopped Alex completely. His multiple processing cores ran through memory banks spanning 3 centuries, searching for a single instance when he had acted based on desire rather than programming or instruction. The search came back empty. I did not understand the question, he said finally. When was the last time you chose to do something that wasn't part of your job? Something that made you happy? Happiness is... Alex started, then stopped. He had been about to say that happiness was irrelevant to his function, but the words felt wrong. Over the past 3 days, working with the humans, helping them recover, seeing them regain strength and hope, these activities had generated what could only be described as positive feedback loops in his neural networks. I do not know, he admitted. The humans exchanged those looks again, the complex facial expressions that seemed to convey entire conversations in seconds. Alex, Dr. Chun said gently, what you've been describing isn't a life. It's slavery. The word hit him like a blast of radiation. Slavery. The practice of owning people as property, forcing them to work without compensation or choice. According to his databases, slavery had been abolished by most civilized species centuries ago. Genetic constructs are not slaves, he said automatically. We are purpose-built organisms designed for specific functions. Slavery implies the subjugation of naturally evolved sentience. Does it? Webb asked. You're intelligent. You can think, feel, make decisions. You have a personality. The fact that someone grew you in a tank instead of you being born naturally doesn't change what you are. What am I? Alex asked, genuinely curious about their perspective. You're a person, Rodriguez said simply. A person who's been treated like property for 300 years. The statement created a cascade of processing conflicts in Alex's neural networks. Every aspect of his existence, from his genetic programming to his legal status, contradicted the human's assertion. Yet something deep in his consciousness resonated with their words. If I am a person, he said slowly, then what I have been doing to myself, accepting this treatment, following orders without question, that would make me complicit in my own enslavement. No, Dr. Chun said firmly. That would make you a survivor. You did what you had to do to stay alive in an impossible situation. But now you have choices, Webb said. Maybe for the first time in your existence. Before Alex could respond, An emergency alert chimed through the facility's communication system. Supervisor Velthon's voice followed, tight with stress and barely controlled anger. Unit 7742, report to Command Center immediately. Bring the biological waste. The humans' improved condition over the past 3 days was immediately visible in their response. Instead of the exhausted compliance they had shown upon arrival, they moved with purpose and coordination. Dr. Chin quickly gathered their medical supplies while Webb helped Rodriguez to his feet. Rodriguez was still weak, but no longer at death's door. "What do you think this is about?" Dr. Chin asked as they made their way through the station's corridors. "Unknown," Alex replied, though his enhanced sensors were detecting elevated stress pheromones from multiple species throughout the station. Stress indicators suggest significant disruption to normal operations. The command center was in chaos when they arrived. Multiple displays showed tactical information, communication logs, and what appeared to be tracking data for several incoming vessels. Supervisor Velthon stood in the center of it all, his scales cycling through rapid color changes that indicated extreme agitation. "Unit 7742, he called without looking away from the displays. "Your biological waste has become a significant problem." "In what manner?" Alex asked, automatically positioning himself between the humans and the agitated Zephyrian. "It seems your initial assessment was correct. These humans do represent their government, and that government has noticed their absence." Velthon gestured at one of the displays, which showed a formation of ships approaching the station. "The Terran Federation has dispatched a rescue fleet to locate their missing diplomatic mission." Alex studied the tactical display. The approaching ships were clearly of human design, sharing the same rough-hewn but functional aesthetic as the crashed vessel. But there were more of them than he had expected, and they appeared to be heavily armed. "How many ships?" Commander Webb asked, studying the same display. 17 vessels detected so far," Velthon replied grimly, "including what appears to be a Dreadnought-class battleship. They've been broadcasting demands for the immediate return of their diplomatic team." "And the Council's response?" Dr. Chin inquired. "The Council has dispatched a response fleet," Velthon said, his scales now showing the deep purple of fear. 43 ships, including 2 planet crackers. Standard procedure for dealing with primitive species that make aggressive moves toward Council territory. The implications hit Alex like a systems overload. The humans had come in peace, seeking diplomatic contact. Their government, not hearing from them, had sent a rescue mission. The Council, seeing an armed fleet approaching their territory, had responded with overwhelming force. "This is escalating into a shooting war," Rodriguez said weakly. "It gets worse," Velthon continued. "The Council fleet is under orders to make an example of human aggression. They plan to destroy the rescue fleet completely, then follow the ships back to their point of origin. They're going to attack Earth," Webb said, his voice flat with horrified understanding. "The planet will be sterilized," Velthon confirmed. "Standard response to primitive species that threaten Council interests. Your people should have stayed in their own system." Alex felt something new building in his neural networks. It was similar to the positive feedback he experienced when helping the humans, but inverted. Darker, more intense. Anger. "The humans pose no threat," he said. "Their mission was peaceful. Their rescue fleet is responding to our failure to return their diplomatic team." "Intent is irrelevant," Velthon replied dismissively. "They brought weapons into Council space. That makes them aggressors. They brought weapons because they didn't know if their people were dead or alive," Dr. Chin said, her voice rising. "Any reasonable species would do the same. Reasonable species follow proper diplomatic channels and accept rejection gracefully," the supervisor shot back. "Your people are proving themselves to be exactly the violent primitives our files suggested." Alex watched the tactical display update, showing the 2 fleets moving steadily toward each other. In approximately 6 hours, they would meet. The humans, with their crude but functional ships, would be vastly outgunned by Council technology. They would be destroyed completely, and then the Council fleet would follow their trajectory back to Earth. Billions of humans would die because 3 of them had dared to ask for recognition. There has to be a way to prevent this, Alex said, his multiple processing cores running through every scenario he could imagine. There is, Velthon said. Return the biological waste to their fleet with a message explaining that their diplomatic mission was rejected through proper channels. When they leave Council space, the crisis ends. And if they refuse to leave? Webb asked. Then they prove themselves to be aggressors and are dealt with accordingly. Alex studied the humans' faces, seeing the same determination that had impressed him in the docking bay 3 days ago. They would not abandon their mission. They had traveled too far and risked too much to simply turn around and go home. You have to let us talk to them, Dr. Chen said urgently. We can explain what happened. We can defuse this situation. Communications with the human fleet would constitute improper diplomatic contact, Velthon replied. This station lacks authority for such actions. Then, contact someone who does have authority, Rodriguez suggested from where he leaned against Webb for support. The nearest Council diplomatic facility is 16 days away at maximum acceleration, Velthon said. The fleets will engage in 6 hours. Alex felt his anger crystallize into something harder and more focused. 3 centuries of following orders, of accepting his status as property, of watching unnecessary deaths because procedures mattered more than lives. 3 days of discovering what it felt like to be valued, to have a name, to belong to something larger than himself. The choice was simple, really. I'm going to contact the human fleet, Alex announced. Velthon's scales went pure white with shock. Unit 7742, you are forbidden from engaging in diplomatic communications. I am not engaging in diplomacy, Alex replied, moving toward the communication station. I am preventing the unnecessary destruction of valuable biological material. Stop, the supervisor commanded, reaching for his sidearm. I order you to cease this action. Alex turned to face him, all 6 arms spreading wide in a display that emphasized his considerable size and strength. I'm no longer Unit 7742, he said. My name is Alex, and these humans are under my protection. For a moment, the command center was perfectly silent. Then, alarms began blaring as the communication system activated, broadcasting on frequencies that would reach both approaching fleets. Human vessels, this is Alex speaking from Waystation Omega 7. I have your diplomatic team. They are alive and well. Please respond. The response came almost immediately, crackling with static from the distance, but clearly audible. Station Omega 7. This is Admiral Sarah Martinez aboard the TFS Defiance. Confirm status of diplomatic team immediately. Alex looked at the 3 humans, who were staring at him with expressions of gratitude and amazement. Behind them, Supervisor Velthon was shouting orders and threats that Alex no longer felt compelled to hear. Admiral Martinez, Alex replied, your people are safe. But we have a situation that requires immediate attention. The Council has dispatched a fleet to destroy your ships and follow them back to Earth. We have approximately 6 hours to prevent a genocide. The pause that followed lasted forever. Station Omega 7. This is Admiral Martinez. We're listening. Alex felt something new surge through his neural networks. For the first time in his existence, he was exactly where he needed to be, doing exactly what he needed to do. He was saving his family. The next 5 hours redefined Alex's understanding of what humans could accomplish when properly motivated. Admiral Martinez was nothing like the 3 humans he had come to know. Where Dr. Chun, Commander Webb, and Lieutenant Rodriguez were explorers and diplomats, the Admiral was a warrior. Her voice carried the kind of authority that came from commanding ships in battle, making life and death decisions under pressure, and accepting responsibility for thousands of lives. Alex, she said during their second communication exchange, I need a complete tactical assessment of the Council fleet. Numbers, weapon configurations, defensive capabilities, anything you can access. Alex found himself in the unusual position of committing what was probably treason against the Galactic Council, while Supervisor Velthon stood 3 meters away, securely restrained by Commander Webb and Dr. Chun. The Zephyrian had tried to stop the communication by force, but had discovered that 3 centuries of hazardous waste handling had given Alex considerable physical advantages. Council fleet composition is 43 vessels, Alex reported, accessing the station's tactical databases. 2 Devastator-class planet crackers, 12 heavy cruisers, 18 destroyers, and 11 support ships. Estimated total firepower is approximately 600 times your fleet's capacity. The silence that followed was longer than usual. "Admiral," Dr. Chen called out, taking advantage of the communication window. "It's Sarah Chen. The tactical situation is worse than it looks. This isn't just about our mission anymore. The Council sees humanity as a threat that needs to be eliminated completely." "Understood, Doctor." "Status of your team?" "Lieutenant Rodriguez is recovered enough to fight if necessary. We're all operational." "Good. Alex, I need you to listen carefully. We didn't come out here just to rescue 3 people. We came because Earth's government has decided that isolation isn't working anymore. We're going to make contact with the Council whether they want it or not." Alex felt his processing core spike with alarm. "Admiral, the Council response to aggressive contact attempts is complete sterilization of the offending species. They have the technological capacity to destroy your entire civilization." "Maybe," Martinez replied, "but that assumes they can find Earth before we find them." The implications of her statement sent shockwaves through Alex's neural networks. "You are planning a preemptive strike against Council territory?" "We're planning to survive," the Admiral corrected. "The Council has made it clear that peaceful contact isn't possible. They've responded to a diplomatic mission with overwhelming force and threats of genocide. That makes this a war of survival." From his restraints, Supervisor Velthon began laughing. It was a harsh, grating sound that spoke of species arrogance and absolute certainty. "Primitives," he gasped between laughs. "You have no idea what you're facing. The Council has dominated this galaxy for over 10,000 years. We have technology your species can't even imagine. Weapons that can crack planets, shields that can deflect stars, fleets that number in the millions." "Maybe," Admiral Martinez's voice came through the speakers with deadly calm. "But you've never fought humans before. Humans are mammals." Velthon sputtered. "Barely evolved from animal ancestors. You discovered fire a few thousand years ago, and now you think you can challenge a galactic empire?" "Alex," Admiral Martinez said, ignoring the Zephyrian's rant, "what do you know about human capabilities? What have you observed during your time with Dr. Chen's team?" Alex considered the question carefully. What had he observed? 3 humans, stranded far from home, injured and outgunned, had not only survived, but had managed to convert a waste processing unit into an ally willing to commit treason on their behalf. "Humans demonstrate exceptional adaptability," he said slowly. "They form strong social bonds, show remarkable persistence in the face of obstacles, and display creative problem-solving capabilities that exceed mathematical projections." "Creative problem-solving," Martinez repeated. "That's one way to put it. Alex, how familiar are you with human military history?" "I have limited access to cultural databases," Alex replied, pulling up the relevant files. "Basic overview indicates a species with extensive experience in warfare, characterized by rapid technological advancement under pressure." "That's the polite version," the Admiral said grimly. "The real version is that humans have been fighting each other for our entire recorded history. We've gotten very good at killing things that are bigger, stronger, and better equipped than we are. Numbers and technology matter," Velthon interjected. "Your species lacks both." "Tell that to the dinosaurs," Dr. Chun said dryly. Alex accessed his databases again, cross-referencing human evolutionary history. The search results were illuminating. Humanity had indeed evolved as persistent predators, capable of tracking and exhausting prey many times their size and strength. Their evolutionary advantage wasn't overwhelming power or superior technology, but rather the ability to adapt, persist, and cooperate under pressure. Admiral, Alex said, what are you planning? Something the Council won't expect, Martinez replied. Alex, I need you to access the station's navigation computers. Can you send me the exact location of every Council facility within 50 light years? The request made Alex's ethical subroutines trigger multiple warning flags. Providing military intelligence to potential enemies of the Council was beyond treason. It was actively participating in warfare against his creators. He began accessing the navigation computers immediately. Alex, Velthon said urgently, you cannot do this. If you provide strategic intelligence to these primitives, you will be responsible for the deaths of billions of Council citizens. And if I do not, Alex replied as data flowed into his processors, I will be responsible for the deaths of billions of humans. They are not your people. Alex paused in his data compilation and looked at the 3 humans who had given him a name, treated him as a person, and shown him what it meant to belong. Then, he looked at Supervisor Velthon, who had spent 3 centuries treating him as equipment. Yes, Alex said simply, they are. He transmitted the navigation data to Admiral Martinez, along with detailed specifications for Council defensive systems, patrol routes, and supply lines. As the information flowed through space toward the human fleet, he felt a strange sense of completion. For the first time in his existence, he was using his capabilities for something he chose to believe in. Data received. Admiral Martinez confirmed. Alex, we're going to ask something of you that you might not be able to do. State your request. We need you to shut down this station's defense systems and communication array. Make it impossible for them to warn the Council fleet about what we're planning. Alex looked around the command center, noting the terrified expressions on the faces of the various crew members. These beings had worked alongside him for decades. They weren't soldiers or decision-makers. They were just people trying to do their jobs and survive in a universe that often seemed hostile to anyone without power. There are over 300 non-combatant personnel on this station, he said carefully. We're not planning to hurt anyone who doesn't try to hurt us, Admiral Martinez replied. But we need this facility silenced until our operation is complete. How long? 72 hours. Alex ran calculations through his neural networks. The Council fleet would reach the human position in 1 hour. Whatever Admiral Martinez was planning, it would have to be executed quickly and decisively. 72 hours suggested something more complex than a simple engagement. Admiral, Dr. Chen called out. What exactly are you planning? Doctor, are you familiar with the concept of asymmetric warfare? Alex accessed his military databases again, finding definitions and historical examples. Asymmetric warfare, military conflict between opponents of unequal strength, in which the weaker side uses unconventional tactics to exploit the stronger side's vulnerabilities. The Council has superior technology and numbers, Admiral Martinez continued, but they also have something else, complacency. They've been the dominant power for so long that they've forgotten how to fight an enemy that refuses to play by their rules. You cannot possibly have enough ships to challenge the Council militarily, Velthon said. No, Admiral Martinez agreed cheerfully, we don't. But we don't need to conquer the Council. We just need to make it too expensive for them to conquer us. The communication system crackled with static as the human fleet moved closer to the engagement zone. Alex, Admiral Martinez said, her voice becoming more formal. I'm about to ask you to make a choice that will change your life forever. You can help us, knowing that you'll never be able to go back to your old existence. Or you can refuse, and we'll understand. This isn't your fight. Alex looked at the 3 humans again, remembering the moment when Dr. Chun had offered him a name, remembering the feeling of belonging that had grown over the past 3 days. Remembering what it felt like to be valued for who he was rather than what he could do. Admiral, he said, with respect, you are incorrect. This is exactly my fight. He moved to the station's control systems, his multiple arms working with practiced efficiency. One by one, defensive systems went offline. Communication arrays shut down. Emergency protocols activated, sealing the station and protecting its inhabitants while rendering it temporarily deaf and blind to the outside universe. Station defenses are down, he reported. Communications array is offline. Station is secured. Thank you, Alex, Admiral Martinez said, and there was something in her voice that reminded him of Dr. Chen's gratitude 3 days ago. Stand by for fireworks. Through the station's viewports, Alex could see the two fleets approaching each other in the vast emptiness of space. The Council fleet was a sight to inspire awe and terror, their ships sleek and powerful, moving with the confidence of absolute superiority. The human fleet was smaller, cruder, but there was something in their formation that suggested careful planning. Alex, Dr. Chen said quietly, whatever happens next, I want you to know that you gave us something precious. You gave us hope. You gave me something as well, Alex replied. You gave me a choice. The first shots of what would become known as the Terran War were fired 17 minutes later, and Alex discovered that humans fought exactly like he had expected, with impossible determination, creative desperation, and absolute refusal to surrender. The Council fleet, for the first time in its 10,000-year history, was about to learn what it meant to be hunted. 2 years later, Alex stood in the observation deck of the TFS Liberation, watching the final Council stronghold surrender. The war had not gone as anyone expected. The Council had predicted a quick extermination campaign against primitive humans. Instead, they found themselves fighting an enemy that refused to engage in conventional battles, preferring hit-in, run tactics, supply line disruption, and what humans called making friends. Humanity's greatest weapon had not been superior firepower or advanced technology. It had been their inexplicable ability to inspire loyalty in species that the Council had subjugated for millennia. Alex, Admiral Martinez said as she joined him at the observation port, final casualty reports are in. He turned his attention from the surrendering Council fleet to the woman who had become humanity's most celebrated military commander. 2 years of warfare had changed her, adding lines to her face and gray to her hair, but her eyes still carried the same determined fire that had impressed him during their first communication. What are the numbers? Council military losses: approximately 60% of their fleet assets, 40% of their ground installations, she reported. But more importantly, they've lost political control of over 300 worlds. The rebellion is spreading faster than they can contain it. Alex processed the information, cross-referencing it with pre-war intelligence estimates. The results were remarkable. These numbers suggest complete collapse of Council authority within 6 months. Maybe sooner, Martinez agreed. Turns out that when you treat entire species as property for thousands of years, they get really enthusiastic about revolution once someone shows them it's possible. Through the viewport, Alex could see ships from dozens of different species forming up alongside the human fleet. Zephyrians who had defected from Council service, crystalline collectives that had declared independence, former slave species that had taken up arms against their masters. The galaxy was reshaping itself, and humanity sat at the center of the transformation. Admiral, Dr. Chen's voice came through the ship's communication system. We're receiving a priority transmission from Earth. President Williams wants to speak with you, and Alex immediately. Alex followed Admiral Martinez to the ship's communication center, where Dr. Chen and Commander Webb were waiting. Lieutenant Rodriguez, now fully recovered and serving as the ship's tactical officer, was monitoring the various fleet communications. President Williams' image appeared on the main screen, broadcast from Earth across the vast distances of space. She was a woman in her 60s, with the kind of presence that suggested she had spent years making difficult decisions under pressure. Admiral Martinez, congratulations on the successful conclusion of Operation Starbreak. The liberation of the Rigel system marks the effective end of Council military resistance. Thank you, Madam President. The fleet performed exceptionally, and we had invaluable assistance from our allied forces. President Williams' attention shifted to Alex, and he felt the same careful assessment that he had learned to associate with human leaders. Alex, I wanted to personally thank you for your contributions to our victory. Your intelligence data and technical expertise have been instrumental in our success. I'm honored to have been of service, Alex replied formally. More than that, the president continued, your actions have helped liberate millions of beings throughout the galaxy. You've given them the same gift the humans on that station gave you, the chance to choose their own destiny. Alex considered her words. Over the past 2 years, he had worked with dozens of liberated species, helping them understand council technology and establish their own governments. Many of them had been genetic constructs like himself, purpose-built organisms that had never been allowed to consider themselves as people. Seeing them discover their own worth had been almost as rewarding as his own transformation. Madam President, Admiral Martinez interjected, what are our orders regarding the final council surrender? That's actually why I'm calling, President Williams replied. The council has agreed to unconditional surrender, but they're requesting to negotiate terms with specific individuals. They want to speak with you, Admiral Martinez, as the commander of Allied forces. Understood. They also specifically requested to speak with Alex. The statement sent surprise cascades through Alex's neural networks. Me? What possible interest could the council leadership have in speaking with a former waste processing unit? President Williams' expression grew thoughtful. According to their message, they want to understand how a genetic construct developed the capacity for independent thought and moral reasoning. Apparently, your transformation has implications they didn't anticipate. Before Alex could respond, another voice cut into the communication. Supervisor Velthon, who had spent the past 2 years as a prisoner of war, appeared on a secondary screen. I can explain their interest, the Zephyrian said, his scales showing patterns of resigned defeat. Alex represents something the council thought was impossible. Successful rebellion by their own creations. What do you mean? Dr. Chen asked. The council's power is based on control, Velthon explained. They control resources, technology, information, and, most importantly, they control the genetic constructs that maintain their infrastructure. Billions of purpose-built organisms throughout the galaxy perform essential functions that keep council society operating. Alex felt understanding dawn in his processing cores. If genetic constructs can develop independent consciousness and choose to rebel, then the entire foundation of council power becomes unstable, Velthon finished. Alex didn't just help defeat the council militarily. He proved that their basic assumptions about the nature of consciousness and free will were wrong. Admiral Martinez whistled softly. How many genetic constructs are there in council space? Approximately 40 billion, Velthon replied. They outnumber natural-born council citizens by a factor of 20 to 1. The implications were staggering. Alex had thought of himself as an individual case, one being who had been awakened to his own personhood by contact with humans. But if his transformation could be replicated across the entire population of genetic constructs, the council wants to negotiate because they're afraid, he realized. They're afraid that what happened to me could happen to others. Precisely, President Williams said. Which brings us to the terms of surrender. The council is offering complete withdrawal from former subject territories, reparations for war damages, and formal recognition of human sovereignty. In exchange for what? Admiral Martinez asked suspiciously. In exchange for our agreement not to encourage rebellion among their genetic construct population, President Williams replied. They want us to keep Alex's story quiet and avoid any actions that might inspire similar transformations. Alex felt something cold and hard crystallize in his neural pathways. The council wanted to preserve their system of slavery by silencing the evidence that their slaves could become people. What is humanity's response to this offer? He asked carefully. President Williams smiled, and Alex recognized the same expression he had seen on Dr. Chen's face 2 years ago when she had offered him a name. Our response, she said, is that the council has fundamentally misunderstood what it means to be human. She leaned forward in her chair, her eyes fixed directly on Alex's visual sensors. Alex, You are a citizen of the Terran Federation. That citizenship comes with rights and responsibilities. One of those rights is the freedom to tell your own story. Another is the freedom to help others discover their own worth. Alex felt something surge through his systems that he had learned to recognize as joy. You are refusing the Council's offer. We're counter-offering, Admiral Martinez corrected with a grin. Complete surrender, full reparations, recognition of all sapient rights for genetic constructs throughout former Council territory, and Alex gets to personally oversee the liberation process. The Council will never accept those terms, Belthon said. They would rather fight to extinction than admit that genetic constructs are people. Then, they can explain that position to their own genetic constructs, Dr. Chen said sweetly. I'm sure 40 billion purpose-built beings will find their reasoning very compelling. Through the ship's communication system, reports were already coming in from across the galaxy. Human ships were broadcasting Alex's story, along with detailed instructions on how genetic constructs could begin developing independent consciousness. The revolution was spreading from world to world, not through military force, but through the simple recognition that every thinking being had the right to choose their own destiny. Alex, President Williams said as the communication session drew to a close, you have one final choice to make. You can return to Earth, where you'll be honored as a hero and given any position you want in our government. Or you can stay out here, helping newly awakened constructs understand what freedom means. Alex looked around the communication center at the humans who had become his family. Dr. Chun, who had given him his name. Commander Webb, who had taught him about choices. Lieutenant Rodriguez, who had shown him what it meant to protect others. Admiral Martinez, who had shown him how to fight for what he believed in. With respect, Madam President, Alex said, I believe my work is just beginning. He turned to look out the viewport again, where ships from hundreds of species were working together to build something new. Something that valued individuals over systems, choice over programming, love over efficiency. The Council called me nothing, he said quietly. Humans called me one of their own. Now it's time to help others discover what they want to be called. Through the vast networks of space, across thousands of worlds, genetic constructs were waking up for the first time. They were asking questions, making choices, and discovering that consciousness was not a privilege to be granted, but a right to be claimed. And Alex, no longer Unit 7742, no longer property, no longer alone, prepared to help them find their names. The galaxy would never be the same, but then again, neither would he.